when I'm looking at the concepts in your book and learning about you and what you are building, all I was thinking about is how I utilize AI every single day. And for me, the number one way that I use AI is to brainstorm. So I love to think, I love, as a visionary, I love to build ideas, right? Sometimes you get lost in the idea without the execution. So what I love about it is I build ideas inside of the AI in ChatGPT, for example, and I vet those ideas. I ask for what other situations or ideas are out there like that? Who else is doing these things? What should I be reading? And it just starts, it's like a brainstorming session. Instead of Googling it and reading one article, it's an active connection between you know, two parts that are equally moving towards the same goal. And I find it to be just fascinating for me.
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned that. One of the stories that I mentioned in the book is one by, I don't know if you've heard of Dick Fosbury. So Dick
No.
Fosbury, okay, so he was an American athlete who really liked sports and particularly high jump. And he talks about the fact that he was good at high jump, but not great. And he was just about making like his high school team and then college team. But the penny dropped when he realized that if he carries on down the same path that all the other high jumpers are jumping, which back then was the scissor jump. That means you run, 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 and try and sort of jump with your legs like scissors over the bar. He will never ever win. So he went home, and unlike all the others who were looking for small incremental improvements to get them that extra sort of half a centimeter, he went back to the drawing board and said, I need something completely different, completely different. And he talks about the process. He was also an engineer by background, which is why I like it. But he went back to the drawing board and he started thinking about other ways. And he came up with some really exotic ideas, one of which was then named after him the Fosbury flop, which is where you jump with your back over first and do what we know today.
Yep.
And
Yep.
as extreme as this may sound, the guy who was good, not great, only a couple of years later won the gold medal in Mexico Olympics. And it was thanks to this sort of idea of, rather than looking for a small incremental A/B testing improvement, take a step back and try and do something dramatically different. And this is something that AI teaches us. So if you were to look at how Google search works, so you mentioned Google search, you put something into the search. So Google has learned their AI algorithm that is using search to try and give you your best search results or the best answers to your query. It used to work in a very factual way, so sort of climbing a mountain very slowly. Today, in that half a second, Google is doing a brainstorm and experimenting completely different ideas. So if Scott looks for, like, I don't know, cool skiing holidays because we're coming up to Christmas, in that fraction of a second, Google will say, okay, we have the regular skiing options, but maybe there's something completely different. Like maybe he's looking for a winter holiday, but not necessarily skiing. Once upon a time, they wouldn't think that way. And given the way the AI algorithms have learned, they realized that even in that fraction of a second, they will run a wild brainstorm session and throw some random results out there as well.
That's great. Well, I'd love to see Google improve because I know I often Google health questions and things that I want to learn about, and I'm often disappointed in the results because never does it give you functional medicine ideas or individual things you could change your nutrition on, or it's always, the top five answers are exactly what, you would get if you went to your doctor. And I don't want those answers. I want to think outside the box. I want to break it and rebuild it. And I don't like traditional answers. And so, the entrepreneur brain really gets AI and the mentality because the way you're describing something is how I would look at any company. If I go into a company, I want to break it and rebuild it better. I don't want to bring it down to a level where it's not profitable, but I would want to bring it to a level where if we know it could be better tomorrow and I can see that other mountain, why am I continuing on the pace that I'm at now when I can exponentially enhance the value of where we stand today?
Yes, it was another story that I talk about in the book is between Blockbuster and Netflix, which I know is a very sort of famous case study. But frankly, I think that a lot of whether it's the Harvard professors who've written about it and other very distinguished scholars, I think some of them might have got it wrong. So when you read about the case studies, they'll tell you, well, it's because that Blockbuster had all these late fees that they were trying to collect, and they'll do all that type of analysis. To me, there was one quote which was given by the Blockbuster CEO and head of innovation. So the two people who really should have seen this Netflix beast coming, and they gave this quote a year before they went bust. So it was like they were still thinking they're ahead of the curve, only a year later to go bust. And their quote was something, I don't remember it off by heart, but I put it in the book, but it was something like, we still don't understand this fascination with Netflix. We have everything Netflix has at Blockbuster and more. And I think the key word there is they said, and more. So it's true, they had streaming, they had a whole bunch of movies, but the problem is they also had tons of stores that nobody wanted to visit, tons of DVDs that nobody wanted to rent, tons of employees that were doing things that were irrelevant. And what they weren't willing to do, to your point, is break all of this stuff that was actually pulling them up the wrong mountain. And so if I had to do the analogy, you had Netflix much lower down, but at the bottom of a much taller mountain, the streaming business, and Blockbuster at the top of a mountain, higher up, but at a mountain that was the wrong mountain. It was buy DVDs rental business. So Netflix was down here and Blockbuster was up here, but these guys were on the wrong mountain and these guys were climbing the right mountain. And what Blockbuster would have had to have done was go through the painful process, which is sometimes more difficult than just climbing a mountain, but of going down the mountain they were on, giving away all of this sort of stuff that they've accumulated that was actually at that point not the right mountain when you looked into the future, to be able to compete with Netflix.
That's a great example. I think of Best Buy as somebody that's done it effectively because they kind of went through these growing pains, and you could see it because I used to buy a lot of things from them, and then I started buying everything from them for the business because there was a local store close, but you could also order it online, and they gave a reward for any type of business account. You automatically guaranteed that you would get free, fixing and whatever it was. And there were so many big benefits, but they altered their moves internally. And even though you felt it as a customer, I also felt it was getting better. Amazon is another. I think Amazon's at a point where they're no longer delivering everything in 2 days or less. And that's a challenge because people are used to it now. And so this on-demand mentality, I was explaining to my uncle just last night. He's like, "How come this Amazon stuff I'm ordering and it's not coming in 2 days? How come some things say it's December 7th?" And he has no concept because he doesn't use it very often. And I'm explaining that, if they're in the warehouse, they could ship it immediately. But if it's not, it's a perfect example of how do you adjust or change course when you know that there has to be something better. And I really, really like the concept of thinking.
It's just, I like what you just said now. So one of the other things I mention and talk about is trading off muscle and agility. So you can all imagine going to the gym and you've got that one guy who is literally just doing bench presses. And that's all that guy does. And like we can all imagine that individual, right? He doesn't do anything else in the gym. He's just bench pressing. And even when he does bench pressing, it's like 3 reps of like massive weights. And then there's the other one who's the all-rounder. So he's not as good, obviously, at the bench pressing, but he's doing a bit of agility and stretching and sort of cardio and everything like that. So now they're going to compete. If the competition is bench pressing, we all know who's going to win that. Okay, it's the first guy. But if the competition starts to change and suddenly it's something completely different, it's a hurdle race. You're running and doing hurdles like nobody expected that. We all know the second guy will win. We don't even know what the first guy and the second guy looks like, but it's the second guy who's going to win that. And in a world that we live in today, where one day it's COVID, the next day everybody's on Zoom, the next day some big regulation comes out, what we see is consistently the agile outperforms the muscular. And by the way, it's the case with software too. So if you look at GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4, anybody wants, you can literally look this up online. You can see how many neurons each of these new large language models have and how many layers. Typically, layers correlates with muscle. It means that it's crunching it again and again. And the breadth of the layers correlates with agility. And what the data scientists are learning is that agility outperforms muscle. If you look at GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, obviously everything is going up, but the thing that is going up faster is actually the agility more than the muscle. We see this in software and we see this in humans. Over long periods of time, it's the agile that will outperform the muscular.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.